sometimes they get into private practice and you kind of assimilate with everybody else. So if you were taught as a DA to use utility gloves, then you go into an office and nobody's using utility gloves, you're going to kind of assimilate with that culture, and that becomes the standard of care. That becomes the norm. You know the information. In your core, you know that what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes just to hear somebody else say it kind of gives you validation. Like, okay, I've been doing it right all along. And then I'm going to make sure that the rest of my team knows that this is the right way to do things too. Every now and then I'll get a dental hygienist that says, oh, but I'm just a dental hygienist. I'm like, you're not just anything. You are a dental healthcare provider. You have been given this amazing gift and this knowledge about safety. Let's make sure you're in an environment where you can practice it properly and that it's deserving of your talents.
Get ready for your unofficial dental hygiene podcast. These are the tales of two hygienists, one East Coast RDH and one West Coast hygienist. Listen as they tackle the profession of dental hygiene with humor and enthusiasm. Now, please join Michelle Strange and Andrew Johnston as they tell you a tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, episode number 246. My name is Andrew.
And this is Michelle, and I'm in full mourning. I'm grieving.
Oh my gosh, yes.
My idol has passed, left this earth. R.I.P. RBG.
Let me explain a little bit of something to our listeners. And also so some of the podcasts I've been listening to a lot lately have been talking about virtue signaling. You know about that?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I want to make sure that our audience understands that your sadness, your sorrow for the thing that has happened
It's not virtue signaling.
is not virtue signaling. Michelle has been so
obsessed.
RBG pro, whatever, for forever. In fact, Molly, before we even moved, ended up getting stickers and I think a tattoo and a bunch of things from Michelle. So when I saw the news, it was within an hour of, it breaking,
Mm-hmm.
I had to call Michelle and be like, how are you doing? I knew immediately it was going to break your heart.
I was like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm so sad.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I mean, she was 87. She lived an amazing life. I'm just super sad. But this whole entire weekend has been a tribute to RBG. I'm like halfway through her book. I've been watching documentaries. I've been listening to old podcasts that she did, these like interviews. And tonight I'll watch yet again, because I love this movie, On the Basis of Sex. Just love it. So anywho, you're right. Like, yeah, I have not been on the RBG bandwagon just like this weekend, I promise.
Though, it's interesting that there are times in our lives that there's like these icons that end up, passing away or whatever. And not that this is even close to what you're going through right now. And this person didn't really have the same type of impact, but Anthony Bourdain was the one. I not even talked about on the podcast, but I remember when he was gone, how shocking it was and how much it actually affected me, even though I don't know who this person is. And it's interesting how, like, as humans, we develop these types of relationships with people that we don't actually know. Yeah, these connections. Mm-hmm. And it sinks in deep, and it's very interesting to me. But yes.
Well, I think everybody felt like that the beginning of 2020 with Kobe Bryant. And
oh my gosh.
I mean, it's just 2020, like, seriously, enough is enough. Okay. Like, we got it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But
well,
anyhow, but this is a dental podcast, so welcome. We are both hygienists, and I just have
this is non-political, non-culinary podcast. It is dental. We'll get there.
I just have a slight obsession with RBG. But since we spoke last, Andrew, I've been temping in a few offices.
Yes. I want to hear everything about this because I'm sure you have an opinion.
I really thought, I don't know, maybe I was like living in La La Land, my little utopia. My hopes and dreams for this is that I hope everybody raises or reaches the bar that I set for our profession. And obviously that's not happening. But I've been into offices that really tried, like they care, but their efforts are falling short. Let's say, for example, getting air purifiers or, the air filters or, things that they're supposed to put in the room. And, CDC has been very specific about like where you place those in each operatory and like how do you redirect or create the airflow and going from the right direction from like clean to dirty. And I'd walk in and they have them, they got them. But I was like, why is it here? Like, why is it in this area right here? Like in the foyer, like not in an operatory. It's in a random hallway somewhere. I'm like, there's some that are making efforts. They're just, I'm like, you just heard the recommendation, you grabbed it and you didn't. That's kind of where it ended.
So did you actually ask them, like, why is it here and not over here? And did they have an answer to that?
It was just, trying. Oh, we didn't realize that it was supposed to be in those specific things. And so they actually asked questions and we're going to make changes. I worked with a dentist that was not doing hand hygiene. Like, I don't know what was happening in their room before they were coming into the hygiene room, but when they entered the hygiene room before gloving, they were not doing hand hygiene. So it's amazing that I'm even asked to come back to some of these offices, because I literally, by the second one, I was like, okay, it wasn't just the first. Did it again on the second. I'm going to get you on the third. So I would just have like the Germex ready. I'm like, oh, here you go.
I would love to be a fly on the wall and just like looking at your eyes and like the anger or the frustration or the whatever.
It's shock. It's pure shock. Again, I don't know why I dream of this utopian experience where I walk into these offices and they're doing team huddles and they're talking about the charts and they're trying to elevate their care and look at it holistically and they're doing all the right infection controls. I don't know why I do that, but that's like, I'm like, oh, let me walk in, and then everyone's showing up with no mask. And I'm like,
yeah, wow, man. Okay. So one, do you think that your expectations are too high for dentistry as a whole?
No.
Okay.
I do not.
Agree to disagree on that one. I think your expectations are a little high.
I guess if I'm following the CDC standards are too high, I guess maybe.
Do you think it's because they don't want to, or do you think they just don't know how to, generally?
I just think they don't know how a lot of times. I don't even know. I don't know what they were doing for the 3 months that everybody was quarantined and kind of shut down, but it was not taking infection control courses. But also, I don't want to, because that was just one like layer in an office.
Sure.
Another office, the doctor showed up like 4 seconds before the first patient, and I didn't even see this doctor, but I was told not to say good morning to him when he walked into my treatment room, because that would imply that that was the first time that I had seen him, which is true. It would have been true, and I would have 100% done it, because I'm like, hello, good morning. How's your day? Not even thinking about like the perception to the patient. But I was like, well, if that's the case, bring your ass to work on time. Like, well, I don't understand. I'm going to get reprimanded for saying good morning because you can't get here on time. But apparently that's a trend amongst a lot of temps in that particular practice. Like, there's very strict rules, like, don't say these very specific things in front of patients. I was like, oh, this ain't going to work. I'll see y'all later.
Man, I wonder if, to like a certain degree, though, if people are like, especially dentists specifically, are like, you know what? I saw my dentist do the dentistry part of it. I think that I would like to go there and help people do the dentistry part of it, not really realizing all of the crap that they were going to have to be responsible for, and not caring about those parts of the dentistry, and then just think, well, good enough. I have an air purifier. Good enough. I have this. Good enough.
I'm sure it is. Sure it is. And, you know, I think maybe I would probably not be so disturbed by it if this was like a newbie dentist out of dental school, just like, oh my gosh, I did not understand all this, like finding their rhythm. Some of these dudes been doing it for like 30 years. So you know the game.
Yeah, but no one's died though from their infection control habits.
I tell you, I'm going to get some people some scrubs that say, but did you die? Like, I want that embroidered on there. But did you die? Come in. But they didn't die. Okay.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah. So it's been a very interesting week. But I will say the upside was I was pleasantly surprised by the embracing of me being a temp. Because I've definitely walked in some office before where I'm just like, ugh, a temp, you know, you'll figure it out. You'll find the gauze. You'll find the x-ray sensors. You'll find all the stuff. And I think because at least here in Charleston, people are having a hard time finding hygienists. And there's quite the demand that they are incredibly grateful and being very kind. So I have enjoyed the experience from that aspect. That like people are actually coming in the room like, "Are you good? Did you find everything you need? Is there anything else I need to get you? Are you good?" And I'm like, "I'm doing great, but thank you so much for even checking in on me." Like, it feels so ridiculous to be excited by that. Like that should be the norm. But I was very excited, but it was definitely eye-opening to get back into that temping world, and I'm just going to confirm that I don't love it.
I think, temping, and then if you're in one company going from office to office is totally a different situation.
It's a little easier. Yeah.
I did some temping like way back in the day, but I loved going into other offices, and I was in 40 something of our offices when I worked at Willamette. Seeing all the doctors and all the hygienists and all the assistants and how they all work differently and do this and that. And to your point, though, there's definitely a different situation when people are checking up on you and, "Hey, you good?" That's all they need to say. "Are you good?" Mm-hmm. And then if I had a question about something, I'm like, "What about this?" Like, just check in on me. And then the other ones that I literally had people tell me, like, "You're lucky that I'm even over here talking to you right now because we don't have time for you." Like, "Oh, okay. I'm helping you guys out and you treat me like that." So
it's just the audacity sometimes of these team members. It blows my mind. And I think it just also, it makes me very sad for the culture of the practice that they are all working in that. I mean, and let's be very honest, like we spend a ton of hours in these offices, and somebody got mad at me one time because I said this, but I still hold true that, a lot of these work relationships are like little tiny marriages, like you're showing up, you got to handle some people on their good days, their bad days. You got to appreciate the good, the bad. You get to understand like when they're starting to get hangry and, just all of those details about your people that you're spending 30 to 40 hours with each week, because in some cases that might not be as many hours as you spend with spouses and significant others, depending on like your work schedules, and you come home and you got 3 hours a night together, like it's before you go to bed. So I just think it's very interesting to have that kind of culture and how exhausting that would be.
Yeah.
I don't either. So that was my experience this week. Really interesting. Last 2 weeks, I should say, not just this week, just the last 2 weeks. But I'm totally fine, though, I will say, with the N95 face shield situation. You and I have both always kind of garbed up with the right. I mean, we weren't wearing N95s. I don't think either one of us were in face masks, but we were always wearing like long sleeve gowns,
not face shields,
cups,
but face masks.
Oh yeah, yes, sorry, yes, face shields.
That's right. Just clarifying that.
Let's just clarify: we did wear our face masks, proper levels. Well, and then you just recently got loops. I've been always wearing loops. I will say now my surgical cap and a face shield is honestly kind of the newest things, but I don't hate it. I'm learning which face shield I like because I definitely have some reusable ones I'm trying out. So by like patient 7, I'm like, yeah, my skull isn't really loving this anymore. My neck doesn't love this anymore.
Yeah. I found that there were some, though, that we were using some of the disinfecting wipes to kind of wipe down, and then they would either the chemicals or the abrasiveness, would scratch it up or make it foggy. And so some weren't as good as some of the other ones, but yeah.
Yeah. And I did find it a little difficult because most of the offices I was in, we were going and getting the patient, or at least calling them and telling them to come up to the porch, and we'd like unlock the door and open it. And I mean, it's not my most ideal situation to be like pulling off that lab jacket, like putting it back on with the light cord in the right spot. And that's not ideal, but
yeah,
I'm all right with it. I'll deal with those little annoyances. But anyway, we're going to get into this interview with Karen Dahl. I had such a great time chatting with her. I mean, it was like the longest or fastest 45 minutes to an hour. It was so much fun to chat with her. I learned and was reminded again of some OSHA stuff. Be sure to check out all the resources that she gives you in the podcast. But I think you're going to really enjoy, hopefully you do, as much as I did, this episode with Karen Dahl.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
It's time for the interview.
Oh, but I had something else to say.
We need to let the experts talk now.
Fine. Welcome, everyone, to the interview portion of this podcast. You know, this is my favorite part always. And we are sticking to the Dental Infection Control Awareness Month that OSAP puts on almost every year, every September. And I'm excited to talk about OSHA. I know that you guys are like, what are we doing talking about OSHA? But listen, we all need it. We don't need it, but we do. But I'm so excited to bring on Karen Dahl. Karen is actually, she was on a task force with me with OSAP. I've already learned a lot from her with other courses that I've seen her on and listened to her. So it's an honor to have been on that task force with you, Karen, and to have you on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be so much fun. I know people don't normally think OSHA and fun go together, but this is going to be fun. I promise you.
It's fun when you don't get a fine.
Yes,
so
there we go. That's always a good thing.
So tell us a little about what you do, who you are, and why you love OSHA.
So yes, I am an authorized OSHA trainer. Snooze. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii. I moved out to Columbus, Ohio to attend the Ohio State University. And if any of your listeners know anything about college football, you may find it interesting that I married a Michigan man. So if you know anything about college football, yeah. I did not start my career. Like, I did not go into college thinking that this is where my career was going to be headed. I was a communications major. My nickname growing up, my mom called me Little Big Mouth because, I mean, you could just not shut me up. And, you know, we used to joke, like, if you could make money just talking, that'd be fabulous. And you know, honestly, like, that was not in my mind when I went down this rabbit hole. I graduated from Ohio State with a communications degree. I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I knew I wanted to be in education. I knew I wanted to get paid for having people listen to what I have to say. My first job out of college was in the emergency department. And that's what introduced me to educating healthcare professionals on safety and infection control. I liked it. I kind of became a safety geek. You know, I mean, I'm an OSHA geek. That's what people call me. After that, I was recruited to the College of Dentistry to do that. I became the assistant director of sterilization monitoring and then became the clinic health and safety director. All the while, you know, students were reaching out to me saying, you know, Karen, I'm an associate at a practice, or, you know, I'm a dental hygienist. I just recently graduated, and we're not doing the things that you told us to do when we were in school. And, you know, can we get in trouble for this? Or, is the doctor right when they tell me that I don't need to do A, B, and C and just forget about it and I can wear the same mask all day? And so I realized there was a huge knowledge gap. And that's kind of how I got into this. But I also had sat through my fair share of the most boring OSHA and infection control seminars. I mean, let's be realistic. Like, when you hear, okay, our office's annual OSHA training is scheduled like 2 weeks from now, that's when all the vacation requests come in. Like, nobody wants to sit through that. Like, nobody goes, yes, today is the day I've been waiting for all year. It's like Christmas. It's OSHA all over again. I totally get it because it can be boring. So I knew early on, I have to be able to present this information, the same information that the office has been receiving for decades in some cases. I have to be able to do it in a way that keeps them awake and be engaged. If I expect them to take anything away from this, as an educator, the best compliment you can get is somebody's next saying that they stayed awake during the whole thing, is that they learned something. And there are some things that I always thought was just absolutely basic, Michelle. I thought, surely this is common knowledge by now. You guys learn this in school, but sometimes they get into private practice and you kind of assimilate with everybody else. So if you were taught as a DA to use utility gloves, then you go into an office and nobody's using utility gloves, you're going to kind of assimilate with that culture. And that becomes the standard of care. That becomes the norm.
So true.
Yeah.
And it happens so often, right?
Yes. Yes. So you have to be able to educate and empower at the same time. I needed my hygienist and my dental assistant to be able to speak up and go, hey, doc, you know what? I've had some thoughts about how we do things in sterilization, or I have some concerns as some ways that we can enhance turning over the room chair side in between patients that is more in alignment with how I was taught to do things. Because I can give you all the content in the world. If it doesn't stick and you don't feel comfortable bringing it up in a safety meeting, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing as not even doing the training. There are people who do that, what I call check off the box training every year. You sit down in front of pre-recorded video and that's it. Or God forbid, in, one office, they're watching a VHS tape. For those of you guys who are too young to know what that is, like Google it.
Oh gosh. And then don't tell us because I'll cry if you didn't know that.
Yeah, so this office was doing that. And that's how they were doing OSHA training every single year. And granted, maybe the bloodborne pathogen standard has not changed in all that time, but infection control certainly has, and the way you present it certainly has. You have to be able to make sure that at the end of the day, for the docs that are listening, that it's not just that you offered it and that your team took the information. Can they demonstrate competency with it? Can they demonstrate proficiency in the knowledge of this information? That's, at the end of the day, that's what's going to prevent you from getting that fine, from having somebody report you, from you ending up on the 6 o'clock news. So that's sometimes how I promote and advertise my courses. Like, I'm going to walk you through how not to do OSHA and infection control and how to keep you off the local news, because that's your reputation. That's, that's more than just paying a fine. You're going to become known as the doctor who did this. I mean, can you imagine? I don't know if you heard the story of Jen Maroney from Jen's Vision. Do you know who she is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being that endodontist. Like, you've got to live that down as a doctor who dropped a needle in somebody's eye, right?
And she's going around educating. Like, that's being relived as she needs to. I don't mean to say that that's a bad idea, but she's talking about that. Like, you don't want to be that.
How powerful is that? How powerful is this? Okay. So I got the pleasure of meeting her in person once, and she's just the nicest person. If you guys don't know about Jen Maroney, please look up Jen's Vision. She's got a Facebook page around it and stuff like that. And basically what she's done is she took this adverse event, having a stinking needle dropped in your eye, right? And then turning it, this negative event, into something positive, where now she goes out and she educates and lectures, not just to patients to advocate for being provided eyewear, but also educating the clinicians to wear eyewear and provide eyewear to the patients too. So she's really made eye safety her message. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that I could prevent that kind of stuff from happening, but also giving people the tools and giving them a voice. And I love this generation. The students that are graduating now, I think, are much more confident in their ability to speak up about stuff like this. Where when I was taught you play nice in the sandbox, you don't rock the boat, so you don't speak up when you saw something, necessarily like, oh, you know what? Yeah, we're not disinfecting, for the full time. It's okay. And now you've got people who are like, hey, that surface wasn't wet for the full 3 minutes. And I'm like, yes.
I love it.
We need more of this.
Yes. But you bring up a good point, because being trained and being competent are two very different things when we're talking about safe dental appointments and safe healthcare appointments, for that matter, just preventing healthcare associated infections. Like, that's a big deal. And I always take it back to the professionals, because I've worked, not even just training, I've worked with professionals who are like, I've always done it this way. And I'm like, what other healthcare provider are you okay with saying that to? I'm just curious where you draw the line. Is it with the nurse that takes care of your grandkid, or the person that's about to do an endoscopy on you? Like, where do you draw the line with, it's always been done like that, I don't need to change, I don't need to alter, and I took that training, but I'm not going to really do it. It's fine.
Nowhere.
You
wouldn't put up with that anywhere else. And that's why it was so interesting, because I look at, OSHA training consults for medical and dental. And I will say this, the offices that seek me out want to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so for the longest time, I just thought, wow, everybody's amenable to OSHA training and my recommendations, And eventually I had the one office where the team wanted me in, but the doctor didn't want me in. And I'm not trying to, speak ill of, I'm not trying to pick on doctors, but this is just an example.
Because there's team members like that too,
exactly.
Where the doctor's trying to do it the right thing and the team members don't.
Yeah. You got to have the buy-in from everybody if you're going to make this work, right? If you got a rowboat with a broken oar, will you eventually get there? Yeah, but it's going to take a lot longer than when everybody's rowing in unison and everybody's on the same page with this stuff.
Right.
So yeah, for the longest time I thought everybody loved OSHA and everybody wanted to do OSHA and looked forward to OSHA training. And, I got a rude awakening with a couple of practices where that occurred, where not everybody was on the same page about safety. And my heart was broken. I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't want to do this? What do you mean? This is what you do. And for the first time that I was told, thanks, but no thanks, it occurred to me like, oh my gosh, not everybody is receptive to that. I will say that's the exception, not the norm. When practices reopened as a result, after our shutdown from COVID, I was seeing these horrible operating procedures. One office where they said, you're going to get one mask that's going to last you all day. And if you don't like it, you go buy your own mask. And I was like, oh my gosh, that became an OSHA violation on several different levels, right? And it was scary to me. And it was interesting because I would read these threads from these, the dental board threads, and not dental board, but dental threads. And yet doctors are like, I don't understand why my team doesn't want to come back in. And I was reading the dental hygiene threads going, the doctors only want to give me one back. Yeah.
There you go.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, if I just put you all in one room and just have you guys just talk.
Figure it out. Yeah, work it out.
One office here in Ohio, they managed to reopen and bring just about everybody back with the exception of one hygienist. But that was after they said, okay, everybody, we're gonna have a meeting. And they said they laughed, they cried, but eventually they understood that the end goal for both of them was the exact same, that, we're in a 24-hour news cycle, social media cycle, and there's so much misinformation out there that I was just like, oh my gosh, if you could just hear each other kind of just talk, I think you guys would see that you want the same things in the end, really. Yeah. And I think majority of the offices are like that. I'm not going to say that they're all bad. It's just that one that kind of sticks out.
No, definitely not. And I would love just to give a quick explanation because there's a difference between OSHA and infection control, correct?
Yes.
Because you'll see sometimes on those threads or you'll have conversations and like, that's an OSHA violation. I'm like, well, I think that's more of like a infection control, like CDC or FDA or EPA. But there's a lot of cross-pollination, right, between infection control and OSHA.
Yeah. And you know what? I might be guilty of promulgating that because when I speak about the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and their infection control recommendations, I present it as if it's law. It's a standard of care. So I will speak about it as if it's a requirement rather than a recommendation. And I think maybe other educators who've done the same thing, maybe that's kind of what's led to that confusion. So Occupational Safety and Health Administration is only concerned about employee safety. They don't care what happens. So if the doctor is not incorporated, the doctor can show up in shorts and flip-flops and not necessarily wear gloves. I mean, maybe against the Dental Practice Act for that state, but you know what I'm saying? Like OSHA would not be involved in that. Whereas infection control and prevention, we're talking about how we're going to protect the team member, how we're going to protect the patient, right? How are we going to prevent infection in general? And it's based on these recommendations from the CDC as well as your state, Board of Examiners or state dental board as well. So it can't come from a variety of resources. Many states have adopted CDC as mandatory, as an administrative code or a state law, but they're two very different things. So yeah, you're right. I do kind of see that. I used to cringe when I see that, but I'm just like, you know what? All right. If you think it's an OSHA violation, the bottom line is that it's not right. You know that there's something inherently wrong with this and that it needs to be addressed. And that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. What I say.
So maybe don't focus so much on the nuances of what silo it goes into. Just, it's wrong and something needs to change.
I think so.
That's a good thing.
Thing to say.
Step one, right?
I know that I really should be educating so that people understand the difference, but I'm just grateful sometimes that people are just calling it out.
No, I think that's a great point that you inherently know that something is not working. Someone's safety. Is it employee or is it patient? Who cares? Somebody's safety is an issue. So we need to correct that. I think that even though we might not get, it seems a little nebulous at times. Ultimately, we want to make people safe.
Yes. What is the end goal? What's the bottom line here? Right.
Yes. So with 2020, everything being online or pre-recorded, how can we get OSHA training? Does it have to be live? Can it be like, how does that all work?
That's what worries about some of these offices that kind of just pop your team member in front of this 20-minute online video and then, you're done. what they fail to realize is it has to be interactive. You have to be able to interact with the trainer, contact them at the time of training. So technically, some of those are acceptable. You can watch a video. They give you a toll-free number that you need to call if you have any questions. But, as generic as some of those videos are, I'm surprised they don't have any questions afterwards, right? It might be just a general bloodborne pathogen training, but it doesn't tell you as it pertains to dentistry. We're not using dental terminology. And now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a dental clinician. That is not my background. I was always administrative. My master's was in healthcare administration, but I at least understood that if I'm going to be able to communicate with them, I can understand the lingo. And that's why I like those dental specific, OSHA. And we also know, this being, faculty, this, that when you're educating, they're going to take away so much more if it were live than if they just watch a video or read a passage just to answer the questions and be done with it. Just to be able to pass a quiz. It's not sticking. Whereas if it's live, and if I did a presentation with you where we all had spray bottles and you were all wearing masks and eyewear, you're gonna remember how to properly don and doff that PPE and know how to make sure that if your face was spattered in spray, you're going to be adequately protected.
Well, we talk about this in dentistry, especially when we're talking OHI and like oral hygiene instruction, like toothbrushing. It's like tell, show, do. And so it's sometimes the same thing with our infection prevention. So I'm like a mixed mode learner. I've always been a very mixed mode person. Like I like to listen in class. I like to watch it later. And I mean, it's no doubt that I'm a podcaster because I'm an auditory listener a lot of times, but I like to hear it once. I like to chew it up in my head. I like to go back and watch it later, which is why I like when they're live. I like when there's a recorded version, and then I can take notes so that if I'm like, wait a second, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, I can go back and like, again, chew it up and make sure I learn it. But when it comes to things like donning and doffing, you got to practice that sometimes because you start doing some real funky things in a clinic. I was doing this like weird nervous tick, or like I think maybe like a sweaty mask tick that I developed. And my colleagues called me out on it one time where like if my face itched under my mask, but I knew I was gloved and I couldn't do anything, I would like rub. And for the audience, I'm like kind of like rubbing my mask on my shoulder to like itch my face somehow. And I started doing that without a mask on. Like I wouldn't be gloved. I'd be out and I'd just do like get like hair, something. I don't know what it was. And they're like, why do you do that? And I was like, well, one, that's kind of a horrible thing. Now I just put God knows what's on the outside of my mask onto my shoulder. And so it's like you develop all these like weird little things. So I think that tell, show, do, and like learning and calling people out in a friendly, lovely, loving way is so important, especially when we talk OSHA, because it is a little convoluted sometimes. And when you're seeing it on a screen and it's not really interactive, you just kind of don't retain it, like you said, in the same way.
Yeah. And just a quick shout out to all my safety officers that are listening too, because I know you have a difficult job because, sometimes offices will send that one hygienist to the meeting, right? And you guys know, you've all been in this position before. Doc sends you to go to the OSHA training, and then you're supposed to come back to the office.
Like disseminate it to the masses.
What a huge responsibility, because now you're listed as a trainer, and if anything happens, if something hits the fan, it's all on you, right? Whereas when you get the whole team to listen to the same message, nobody goes, oh, it's just Mary getting on her case about, wrapping her instruments, the right way. It's like, oh, we all heard that person say this is the proper way to wrap our instruments and clean our instruments, et cetera. So yeah, getting that buy-in from the team, I think it's easier for our safety officers if everybody kind of heard the same message to begin with. And many times our hygienists and assistants are saddled with that responsibility. And so I love how far I've seen some folks, go, the information in your core, that what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes just to hear somebody else say it, it kind of gives you validation. Like, okay, I've been doing it right all along. And then I'm going to make sure that the rest of my team knows that this is the right way to do things too.
So just to stick with that thought, or that this conversation, I should say, if you do have somebody that's not quote unquote buying in, maybe they don't want to hear it, you are saying it over and over again, and I always go back to this as my example, but because I've seen it for way too many times in my 20 years, people putting their hands into the ultrasonic, barehanded, pulling out, rinsing things off. They do a quick little wash and go about. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen it. It's so horrible. And it's all, they always do it too when no one's looking. So like you just walk around the corner and you're like,
Yes.
again, here we are. Integrity is when no one is watching, y'all. But how do you get that message, this very important message that isn't meant to be annoying? It's not meant to be like, you're not trying to be a nag. It's ultimately to keep us all healthy and safe, but they're just not buying in. I mean, do you have suggestions for those safety officers to get it to click?
That is a tough position to be in. You know, one of the things I noticed was I could tell our dental students or dental hygiene students, like, till I'm blue in the face, like, you got to make sure you do this. You got to make sure you do that. Don't open the instruments until the patient's seated, et cetera. And then I'll bring an outside speaker in and they'll say the same exact thing. And all of a sudden I've got D3s going, did you know we're not supposed to be doing this? I'm like, oh my, I didn't know there's some sort of psychological phenomenon or some term for it. But I think if everybody hears the same message, sometimes even just from a third party, that, a credible third party, I think that does help. And also key is that we have leadership that sets the expectation, right? That it is not, if Chrissy's saying that you got to wear utility gloves when you're cleaning instruments, then, that is the expectation. That is, especially since she showed me where it says that we're supposed to be doing that then I'm going to expect you guys to do that. So I think really it's multi-pronged. We got to have the buy-in from the team. And the way we do buy-in with the team is, I think, we make sure everybody hears the same message at the training. We maybe mix some training up too. Whatever's been working before doesn't always work later on too. So what can we do to kind of keep them engaged, keep them on their toes, and make it fun, and make it something that people look forward to, right? Make people go like, oh my gosh, yes, it's like Christmas in July. It's our annual OSHA training date, like the day I've been waiting for. Make it something that's fun, engaging. I mean, it doesn't have to be boring. If they associate that with a good time, one of the dental offices, not that you have to do this, but one of the dental offices, they have AM. We do 3 hours of OSHA training in the morning every single year, like clockwork. And then afternoon, doctor takes someone out for a spa day. I mean, so if you know that at the end of this, we're going to have this nice, relaxing day, well, they're going to look forward to every day, right? And it's turned out not to be this cumbersome thing they've got to sit there. They're like, yes, it's OSHA training day. Even though there was spa that they're looking forward to, it makes it the sinking into the message a lot easier. So we've got that on the local level. And then from the top bottom, we have to have doctors that say, you know what, this is important. Your safety is important to me. And because it's important to me, we're going to make sure we carve out the time to make sure that we have this training and that you understand, that you can demonstrate that you understand the information from this training. I could go into an office and know immediately what the culture is like in that office. I can tell you. Oh, yes, I can tell you what is saying that the prisoner's running the prison and they're just going to do whatever they want. I can tell when we have a broken lines of communication between the team and leadership in the office. And I can always tell with a certain degree of certainty which ones are going to be that ideal fit, that when I work with them next year, they did implement everything that I recommended. And for the most part, the office that reach out to me, they do that because they want to make sure they're doing the right thing. So I've been very blessed that those offices, if I say, hey, we've got to make sure we're doing A, B, and C, they're like, okay, what do we need to do A, B, and C now? What are our next steps? And if I don't ever hear from that office, until the next year's OSHA training, I guarantee some things have slipped through the cracks. But the offices that are like, hey, Karen, you told me I need to beef up my exposure control plan. You told me I needed to list engineering work practice controls. I'm not quite sure. Can you refresh my memory on that? Those are the offices that I know when I visit them again in a year from now that they've implemented those recommendations, those requirements.
I think you should, offices should make it a game. Like your spa day gets bigger and better and the more amazing, the more answers you get right in the 3-hour OSHA thing. So my 60-minute massage is 90 minutes if I can tell you all the places utility gloves need to be used.
Yes, that's the way to do it. That's the way to, I can tell people that, for those offices that do safety meetings. So all of my offices are coached to do a monthly safety meeting. I don't want safety to be a one-time, once-a-year event.
So true. Yeah.
I want it to be ongoing dialogue. And so what I tell them to do is I say, because you have to review the exposure control plan by the end of the year, why don't we take portions of that exposure control plan, the different topics, take 12 slips of paper, mark them January through December. Each slip of paper, mark one of those safety topics, put it in a fishbowl. Everybody draws a slip. Whatever month you get, you're going to be the subject matter expert on that topic, which means you're going to do a little bit of research.
Oh, I like
and
this.
then you're going to do a presentation. It doesn't have to be PowerPoint, but what if you stood up in front of the group and just did 3 minutes? Anybody can talk for 3 minutes. Talk for 3 minutes on this particular safety topic. Then you have everybody sign off on it. You date it. Bam, you've got documentation of a monthly safety meeting right there. And it's probably part of your monthly meeting anyways. If you're having morning huddles, let's pick one morning where you get 3 minutes carved out for a safety topic. So it can be fun. Offices love. I was surprised by the number of offices that did that. I had this one gal. She was the quietest person. She was a little mouse of a girl. She was just so quiet. The office emailed me and sent me a picture. It was a picture of everybody just cracking up. And I'm going, what is this a picture of? Remember that gal we told you that wasn't like, who was adamant she was not going to stand? They're like, she's the funniest person in the, like, she got everybody rolled.
She's crushing it. She's just crushing it. Oh, that's so great.
And I think when you give somebody the opportunity to shine, they're going to surprise you in many cases.
Oh, wow. That's a great story.
Yeah.
I love that. So, Karen, I have the $1 million question for 2020.
Uh-oh.
What is going to change with OSHA after this pandemic?
That's a good one. You know, if I were a betting person, I'd be willing to bet we might see federally adopted aerosol transmissible disease as standard. You know, certain states currently have them. You know, you look at the state of California, they've got it right now. Maybe we have something like that that's federal, on the federal level. Now, turning something into a standard takes a while. You know, the silica standard took decades, but then there are other ones that are fast-tracked. If I were to guess, that might be around to stay. Is this the first pandemic, you know, that we've dealt with? No. Is it going to be the last? No. I'm not, I don't read like, conspiracy theory type stuff. There's a wonderful book, though, by David Quammen called Spillover that talks about the increasing rise of zoonotic infections. Have you read that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I listened to a podcast that he did, which was great.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the point of it is not that we should be fearful. The point of it is that it's going to be coming. We need to be prepared. Right. And so I think I can see that happening. We're going to start seeing more of those. We've already started seeing increase exponentially zoonotic infections. So I think that we just need to be prepared. And I think one of those is going to be having that particular type of OSHA standard in place. Once upon a time, we just dealt with bloodborne pathogens. Everything that we know about infection control and OSHA was designed to protect us from hepatitis and HIV. And right after that last pandemic, we saw that pendulum swing so far to the side where I remember opening up dental yearbooks from the 90s and people were dressed in hazmat suits and plastic over everything to treat patients. And then we saw an easing up. We're already seeing that with this. We're seeing it, at first it was like no aerosol generating procedures, only N95s. Then we saw an easing up those restrictions. Okay, highest level rated mask with a full length face shield. We're starting to, as we learn more about the virus, it's easing up. But I think that there are going to be, certain elements of that that are going to be sticking around because the next pandemic we need to be prepared for. I consider this a trial run. This is our chance to get it right.
Well, I love to hear that because that's also my assumption. And I'm not a betting person either, but I do believe that we are going to see some airborne precaution standards like we have bloodborne precautions. I think that we are really going to embrace a lot of engineering controls.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, I think we're definitely going to all learn that we have had crappy air quality in our dental offices and that we really need to look at that because I was doing research for the nose filters for the last 5 years. And one of the things that I kept like stumbling into and I was like, not really talking about a lot was the indoor air pollution and how sick that makes a lot of people, all these people with asthmas. And I brought this up in a few podcasts, I don't know if it was this one or others, but Anne Guion, I remember this so vividly. A few years ago, wrote an article after a Facebook forum, a post on one of the forums where these hygienists were making fun of one of their patients for taping gauze over her nose, because she said, like, every time she came to the dental office, she would get a sinus infection afterwards. And, everyone was just like, these people are so crazy sometimes. Like, when our patients come in, they do the strangest things, like all these other, and I'm like, she might. And I'm reading this going, it might not be the worst idea I've ever heard. Like, I mean, P. gingivalis, we're just blasting that into the air. God knows what else. And they're literally just breathing it in. We protect their eyes, hopefully. We hopefully had a level 3 mask on. Many did not, as we are all learning that nobody even knew what the level of their mask were for many years. And Ann Guion wrote an article about that. And from then on, I was like, we really need to talk about this. No one is talking about it. And then Andy Whitehead. Are you familiar? You know Andy Whitehead?
Yes, I know Andy. Yes.
Andy is great. And he has so much information on masks, right? Like, he's just this little source for masks. And he asked me a question years ago that said, it was something along the lines of like, would you rather wear gloves or a mask? If you had to choose one. And I was like, well, that is like a seatbelt or airbags. Like, which one would you? I don't know. And he was like, well, as long as you have intact skin and you can wash your hands, you might want to consider the mask over the gloves. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. We cannot disinfect our airways. We cannot disinfect our throat, our nose, our, those mucous membranes and our upper respiratory tract. And I was like, God, we need some airborne standards. So we talk about this a little bit more. So I'm predicting a very similar thing to what you are. I think we're going to see that at a federal level.
That's so funny that you should ask about the mask and the glove thing, because once upon a time, I would have been kind of like, that's a tough one. Kind of like my niece always does this, would you rather? She goes, would you rather have one shaved eyebrow or both eyebrows shaved off? And I'm like, where do you get these questions, Amelia? And so that's kind of like that question, like, would you rather have masks? Because now it kind of, the more we learn about what we're breathing in and the fact that, skin does function, when intact skin does function as a really reliable barrier. I still don't want to stick my fingers in crud and stuff, but given the two,
it's more icky, gross feeling than anything.
Yeah. And that, that's another reason why when I do OSHA infection control talks, I'm also talking about water quality too in the office, because people think about, I monitor my water and I maintain my water for the safety of the patients. I'm like, have you ever thought about all the stuff that you're potentially breathing in from your own water lines too? I mean, that's the other side. So I think that there's going to be a huge focus on air quality. I think we're overdue. For the longest time, I've always been questioned by the folks on the medical side, like, why doesn't dentistry do sterilization the same way that we do it in the medical? You know what I mean? So there's certain things that we're starting to see kind of play catch up. Do you think that we're going to see dentistry more in alignment with medical when all this is said and done?
I can only hope, right? We can hope.
Yeah, I think so.
What's so interesting that I always found about our, let's say, the ASTM standards for mask, right? That they were based on medical standards. When we are the generators of most aerosols out of like all the healthcare professions. And so I've always found it very interesting that a lot of things in dentistry are compared to healthcare, when really healthcare should be compared to dentistry, and that dentistry hasn't caught up to healthcare in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like there's a lot of these gaps on both sides of it, right? Like, I think mask standards should be held to dentistry standards for aerosol generating procedures. But when you read ASTM, they talk about arterial like spray. Yeah. And I'm like, let's hope I ain't cutting someone's carotid and getting that arterial spray at the mask. So, but that's how it's gauged. Like, can this level 3 withstand an arterial spray at whatever? I'm like, good. Let's hope not. Hope I never find that out.
I think that's the
like, let me ask.
Because they look at us like, they just say we're all healthcare. We're all your dental, your medical, true. Whatever that hazard is. You've got to abate that hazard. You've got to find the PPE that's going to protect against that specific hazard. Doesn't matter what field or industry that you're in. And that's why I think I was so drawn to OSHA, is because it's just like, it's kind of in some ways it can be gray, but it's black and white. Ultimately it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that you have this in place. But yeah, I mean, we're all under that healthcare umbrella. I sometimes get every now and then I'll get a dental hygienist that says, oh, but I'm just a dental hygienist. I'm like, you're not just anything. You are a dental healthcare provider. You have been given this amazing gift and this knowledge about safety. Let's make sure you're in an environment where you can practice it properly and that it's deserving of your talents. I get people who say, I don't feel comfortable in my office. I'm like, well, you are entitled to a safe work environment. I'm not going to be dismissive and go, oh, that you should find another job if you're not happy. This is not realistic, but certainly should you be able to speak up about it? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's so true. On the flip side of that, I think dentistry does a lot of things really well.
Oh, yes.
Where when I look at healthcare, I'm always like, ooh, like, honey, you take your gloves off. What you doing? What? And I've actually gone and I picked my mom up from an endoscopy, and they like always bring the person back there that's driving them off. And the nurse was like gloved up, typing on the keyboard. And I was like, all right, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt that that's a clean surface. Maybe that keyboard has a cover that's going to be removed. And then she goes and she pulls the IV out with the gloves that she was just typing with, and then pulled the gloves off and went back to typing. And I was like,
yes.
And of course, my family all thinks I'm just a bonkers crazy human. So I was like, I'm not going to embarrass my mom right now. But I 100% emailed that office and I was like, listen, I'm not going to say the name of the nurse. I just think as an overall training for the practice, like maybe you should just revisit some infection control practices, because that was incredibly disheartening to watch, because it makes me wonder where else something as trivial as like taking your gloves off and do proper hand hygiene. If you can't manage that, it makes me a little concerned about like, what are the other practices that are not being accomplished or done properly in the office. So I think dentistry does we've been wearing lab jackets. We've been almost always wearing masks. Gloves have been a standard of care for a while. Everybody I always worked with did really good hand hygiene. I know that is an issue some places, but I think ultimately we do a pretty good job. But from a sterilization standpoint, like you said, are we going to be held to that hospital standard? And I think we should, without a doubt.
I agree. They're going to be they're going to be the people who are going to, now the phones are going to ring out the hook, right? Like, what?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
In a sterile, we don't need a sterile field. So yes, and what's interesting is I like that you said that. I think dentistry does a lot of things really, really well. And you can take the principles of infection control we learned in dentistry, you can apply just about to any scenario. Like if you go to a restaurant, you said that, it drives your family bonkers. Like my family won't even claim me in public anymore when we go out to eat. Like I'm not allowed to sit at the same table with them anymore, because I will order, my beverage without the fruit. When I think about the top areas in a restaurant where it's contaminated, I think about the menus, because you see them wiping down, but you don't see them disinfected yet. So all those hands have been on it, the salt and pepper shakers, which are, there's no requirement in some states that those ever get cleaned out. And then like the fruit, like even my cocktails, like I'll say like, I don't want it with any fruit, because there were studies that showed that over 50% of the fruit, those like or lemon in your iced tea,
and the little containers at the bar and stuff,
contaminated with fecal matter.
I'll die. Oh my God.
So this is my tip to everybody. The next time you go out to order an adult beverage, right? Make it a double, and maybe that extra alcohol will kill whatever's on there.
Just like wiping on the rim. Just thinking.
Yes. I think that dentistry does a fabulous job. We really do. And our heart's in the right place too. That's
True.
The thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that sometimes we fail our team. They know what to do, but if we don't have the environment and the culture and we're not setting those expectations, we're letting them down. We're setting them up to fail. Who wants that? Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. No one's to be embarrassed either. If a patient calls you out, no one wants to be embarrassed.
Exactly.
I do want to circle back to one thing, because I want to make sure our listeners understand that there is a federal OSHA and there's state OSHA. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. A little more have this, bottom line is you need to know what pertains to your state. And even then, I think it was Katrina Sanders who said this. She's like, you want to do your best until you know more, and then you want to do better, right? So something along those lines.
Yeah.
Don't quote me, but I loved it. It stuck with me to this day. And I'm kind of the same way. I'm like, okay, yes, maybe that's not a requirement. So there's federal OSHA. The states that have adopted a state approved plan basically have an agreement in place with federal OSHA that says, okay, we're going to enforce OSHA at a local level. In return, we agree that our standards are going to be at a minimum, as stringent as federal OSHA. So they can, you see that in California. You see that in some other states. So California, I mentioned again, because they've been all over the news because they've already had the aerosol transmissible disease standard for years. And I always wondered, like, why hasn't the rest of the country adopted this? We're generating all these aerosols, we're being exposed to all this. So yes, you want to know if you are in a state with a state approved plan. Now, for the most part, when it comes to bloodborne pathogens, just about all the states have, even a state approved plan has that standard that's equivalent to the federal level. There are some states that have some minor tweaks here and there, but for the most part, they're equivalent to that. So get to know your federal, at a minimum, your federal bloodborne pathogen standard, your federal hazard communications standard. And if all that sounds foreign to you, then it might be time to schedule training for the office and ask those questions. Take the time to ask those questions. In my state, how is it, how is it different? What do I need to know to practice safely in my state? Because OSHA, remember OSHA's employee safety, but I also want to know, not just OSHA, but what about infection control? What does the CDC want us to do? And I think that this is appropriate that we're having this conversation because it's DICAM, and I want everybody, please, everybody who's listening, either go to the OSAP website. Right now, they've opened up all of their members-only resources to everybody. I mean, membership's only like, what, $100 a year, something crazy like that.
Yeah, it's not that much.
You can get all this free stuff right now related to infection control and dentistry. My favorite feature is Ask OSAP. So if you have a question, I guarantee you someone else has asked OSAP, and it is in their library. The other thing, too, is, you can get an infection control certificate, right? And that certificate, it's not just watch a video for 20 minutes, pay $20, you get a certificate. It is, I think it's like, 20 credit hours or something crazy like that. Then you can earn your certificate, and that certificate leads you to an official credential, a certification. So you will be an RDH, and then you will have additional letters after your name that show that you are a specialist in infection control. And I think that that's a testament to your commitment to safety. So I love that we're having all this wonderful OSHA and infection control conversation because it's so appropriate this month.
It is so appropriate. One of the other things that I would love to see change with the pandemic, and I'm hoping 2021 will bring more stringent, I guess, OSHA mandates maybe around coming to work sick.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, and that's,
I don't know.
Gosh darn it. If we could be in charge for just a day, right? That is one of those, I should hope that it is just common knowledge that it would benefit the practice to have sick people stay home. Have a non-punitive HR policy that if you're not well, please keep your germs at home. Because, if I'm talking to a doctor that's only concerned with the bottom line, health and safety be damned, right? Health and safety of my employees.
Right.
I'm only concerned with them. Think about how much you lose in productivity when you have one team member come in sick and then affects everybody else. And next thing you know, you're hiring a bunch of temps, or, you have people who opt to stay home long term. I mean, it just makes sense to have that policy that if you're not well, you stay home, and period. That's what it is. I always fall back on like the general duty clause. If people go, hey, our doctor's making us come in sick. If I'm not well, I'm required to work still. I kind of fall back and say, well, it's a gray area. You could report. There is no black and white, but you're absolutely right. I think what this pandemic has shown us is we need more black and white. When the OSHA guidance document came out, when the CDC recommendations came out, we saw people, across the spectrum going, oh, but, and that was before COVID too. They're like, well, is that a requirement or is that just a recommendation, right? And so I always tell people, it's like, yes, we could do better. We do need more information. We need more black and white, like this is right, this is wrong, this is what'll get you in trouble, this is the right way to do things. But in the absence of that, you said it earlier, it was like integrity is, when you do that, you practice it when nobody's looking.
When no one's watching, yeah.
You know what is the right way to do things. You know what is the wrong way to do things. It's about whether or not you're going to hold yourself accountable to that, no matter what environment you're working. If you're a temp and you bounce around from practice to practice, because I hear the horror stories from all the temps, like,
Oh, yes.
how are you going to address that? Do you feel comfortable enough to speak up to the temp agency that you're working with so they can have that conversation with the office? Or maybe, hopefully, you feel comfortable having that conversation with the office and that they know that it comes from a good place. And it's not Karen's just waving her fingers at us, telling us what we need to do. I always tell people, like, know that what I'm about to tell you, it comes from a place of love. Like, I genuinely care about you. And if you, as a dental hygienist or an assistant as a doctor, can go home and see your family at the end of the day in one piece and unharmed, I can sleep better at night. I can sleep better at night knowing that all the educators out in the world are doing their jobs and all the people who are attending these lectures are paying attention and they're doing their jobs. That makes me feel good.
Yeah, that is so true. And I mean, I just don't understand why, during this COVID thing, people were like, well, people haven't died by going to the dentist. I was like, that's not the most egregious thing that is happening. Like, okay, you didn't die. I was joking. I was like, I'm going to send scrub tops to all of these people that I keep reading on Facebook. They're like, but did you die? Like, oh my gosh. If you get anyone sick because you came to work sick, I think that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I just stay home. You'll feel better. You'll heal faster. You won't spread your germs everywhere. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I went to work sick myself, 100%, because I got guilted into like, oh my gosh, now we got to find a temp. Now we got to reschedule these patients. We're not going to be able to find them. We can't book them out for another 6 months. When else are you going to be working? And I'm like, freak, I might as well just come to work. This is way more exhausting. I can't even like rest because I'm being guilted so much. But to think about it, what was happening is then the assistant that worked with me that day got it. And then the doctor got it. And then guess what? 3 weeks later, I got it again because everyone was sick in the office and we just kept like spreading it around. And if we just took a step back and really looked at our behaviors and our own health, like, why are you like rest? Your body is like, take a break. I need to heal.
Yes.
And we also don't want to get our patients sick. I do want to also, which I'm actually surprised my patients didn't call me out more often because I would come in like truly, truly sick. And some of them would be like, she needs to go home probably.
Just because we felt bad, right?
Yeah. Like they felt bad that I was there, like trying to serve them. And they were like, just go home. But instead, I wish the patient would have been like, if you're going to allow her to come here sick, I'm not coming here.
Right.
I wish.
I always tell people that. I'm
like, that's just horrible.
One of the first, this was before I got into my field of work. I just moved to Ohio as a college student, found a hygienist, a very well-known dental practice here in Columbus, Ohio. And the hygienist, I felt so badly because sitting on the bracket table with all of the dirty instruments, she had a bag of cookies that she, with her gloves on, snacking. Yeah, and I didn't know.
Karen,
no, Michelle, listen, I didn't know any better. I felt awful. I felt so bad for him. Like, don't that give you enough time for lunch that you have to feel the need to snack in them? It's like, gosh darn it, shame on this practice. Well, later on, and I was kind of learning about this stuff. Later on, I'm like, it wasn't that. It was, I just stopped going to the practice. All of a sudden, they were calling me for recalls. I'm like, you're doing right. I'm like, no, I found another dentist. I felt uncomfortable saying something at the time, but what was going on in my head, the narrative that was going on in my head was, if you're that willing to place yourself at risk, like what are you doing behind the scenes to ensure, my safety? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that there's a parallel between somebody who's coming in sick because we don't want to inconvenience, other people. But any culture that would allow for that gives me pause. That's what makes me go, what is going on in that practice? They feel they must, at the end, the world will end if they're not there. What's going on behind the scenes? What's the communication? What's the message that's being spread around this practice around when you're not well? You're absolutely right. They should be at home getting better, right? Me time. Take advantage of it.
Yes. Take a nap.
Yes.
Watching Real Housewives and take a nap. That's what you need.
Or Lucifer.
So I have two quick questions, maybe not quick, but at least just to kind of close it up here. One, things that are new to us right now would be this respiratory protection plan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us like just a brief overview of what the heck that is? And can they like go to your website to learn more about it, or how would they find out more about it?
Yes. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of things. Number one, I will always try to post tidbits, things, frequently asked questions, anything that might be new on the OSHA Lady Facebook page. So if you like and follow it, you'll get those notifications. I also invite anybody who's interested, whether or not you're the safety officer of the practice or not. There is a private dental OSHA and infection control Facebook group. I created this just for my safety officers. It's an opportunity for you to ask a question. So you can't find isolation gowns or N95s, post a question. Anybody else? And then it gives safety officers from around the country to go, hey, I've got the hookup going this way. And also conversely, if somebody posts a question like, hey, are we allowed to make our own disinfecting wipes in the office? Then you can go and answer and go, hey, you know what? Not a good idea. And here's the reasons why. That was one of the most frequently asked questions I had the past few weeks, because we're right now playing disinfection roulette in our office. We're not getting our preferred brand. So that is a good way to kind of stay on top of information. And of course, if you want to work with me, which I want to meet everybody out there, this pandemic has raised my anxiety level because I'm a hugger. I'm a people person. I need to be around people. Then they can reach out to me on the contact page at KarenDaw.com or the OSHALady.com, and then go to the contact page, and that'll allow you to kind of send me a message. Hey, Karen, we want to learn more about training or your next public speaking engagement. So those are some ways to kind of get those updates too, short of checking the CDC page, the OSHA page, the FDA page, the EPA page every single day. Because it's not like they contact me and go, hey, guess what? We got an update. We just thought you'd like to know. As a courtesy, Michelle, this is OSHA. We wanted you to know there's been a change.
It's so true. It's so true. So do you have more information about the respiratory protection plan there?
Yes, respiratory protection program. And this is what I'm finding in majority of the offices that are currently using N95s or KN95s is that we kind of skipped some steps here. The first thing we need to do is you have to have that written respiratory protection program. And guess what? OSHA has a template for you. You can go to the OSHA website, which is Google. If you're better at Googling, just Google OSHA written respiratory protection program hospital, and it will give you the actual template from OSHA. Like, you cannot do more than what OSHA is asking directly from their website. Now, I will tell you to prevent some sticker shock. When you go there and don't print it, it's like 96 pages long. Like, don't print it.
Oh, yeah.
You need to assign somebody to be responsible. That this is going to be the program administrator for the respiratory protection program. This person wants to kind of read it. Now, I will tell you, you're going to read through the first up to page 63, printed page 63, not this page 63 on the actual document, but when you go to the printer, page 63, the first 63 pages, as the administrator, you just want to read over, and it's not all text, it's not like 8-point font. There's some cool pictures in there too. So it's kind of, it breaks up the reading. As the administrator, you want to kind of be familiar with that. Then the last 30 pages is roughly the last 30 pages is the template. So now you have a free template. Don't pay somebody to write it. You don't learn anything when someone else does the work for you. So here's the actual template from OSHA. Retype it in your own words, make it specific to your practice, use the voice of your office when you're writing this document. That is the precursor to the medical clearance. So everybody gets medically cleared to wear that respirator. And I think a lot of people skipped step 1 and step 2 and just went into, I've got N95s. Everybody wear N95s whenever you're generating aerosols.
They definitely did.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did. They skipped fit testing. They skipped the medical clearance. They just put it on their face and hope for the best.
Yes. Yeah. So there's some freebies for you right there. Download that document from OSHA, type it up, get everybody medically cleared. Medical clearance has to be through an MD or an RN in that specific field, and then fit testing. You don't have to pay somebody to do the fit testing. You can do fit testing in office. You can train on user seal checks in office. You go to Amazon, purchase the fit testing supplies, and then go to OSHA and watch a video with the whole office. And you can do fit testing in office. OSHA doesn't say you have to pay somebody to do the fit testing. There are like people who charge you like $50 a pop. And I'm like, here's a video and here's the link to the Amazon site. Do it in office.
Yeah, I did it for our clinic. And I mean, it was, I failed mine because I can't seem to find an N95 that fits my face at this point in time. So I was like, can anybody send me the petite version of an N95? That'd be great. Because those bitters taste horrible when you fail a fit test.
And that's the only solution available on Amazon right now is the irritant smoke and the Bittrex. Like, you can't get saccharin. I prefer sweet over bitter, and you can't get banana oil. I'll take banana oil over irritant smoke any day, but those are your options, and all of them are sold out except for the bitter solution. And yes,
the bitter. That's the one I have.
You know, when you failed using that bitter test, you're just like, ew.
I know. They're like, here, try this one. I'm like, no more, please, no more.
Mercy.
I don't want to do it anymore. I don't need to see patients. I'm kidding. I just don't. No, please. My last question for you. I'm curious. Have you ever experienced or seen or had an office go through an audit?
Yes. I have been contacted by offices that were audited like after the fact, like OSHA contacted them, and then they're like, oh crap, I got a letter. Because majority of the time you'll get a letter first from OSHA. You'll get some sort of form of communication, unless it's an egregious violation, like you are like somebody could die, like the New Jersey dentist that had 13 people go into the hospital for endocarditis and one person died. Yeah. So, and I think people sometimes forget, like, well, I don't want to say they forget, but they're not aware that that is an option to the employees, that if they feel like, and I always tell them, like, communication first, like, please try and talk to the doctors first. Please try and speak with the employers before you go to OSHA. Sometimes they don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. And to be honest, before I accepted that role at the College of Dentistry at Ohio State, dental students, all they know is they showed up at dispensing. They got these sterile instruments. At the end of the day, they returned. They had no idea what happened behind the scenes. And then we started a rotation with the dental students behind the scenes so that they could see what goes on with those instruments. And sometimes they just don't know. They don't know. So have that communication with them. If you feel there's no other recourse, then know that absolutely you can turn to OSHA. You can file either an informal or formal complaint. Either way, you can opt to remain anonymous. And then the office will get a letter. And so that's what happened with this one practice. They got the letter and they said, oh, shoot, we need some help here. We want to make sure we have all our ducks in a row. And they had heard, from a friend of a friend that they had utilized me for OSHA training. And so I was able to go in and basically we addressed everything. I helped them type up the response letter. We took some pictures, we attached it, sent it in. It was an open, shut case. In this particular instance, it was an employee, I believe, anyways, I'm a huge advocate whenever there's an unsafe work condition, but I walked in there and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. The doctors are really well-intentioned and well-meaning. I believe that in this particular case, it was somebody that was, trying to get back at the practice for whatever reason. Somebody had said that she had made that comment when she was let go. So I think that there was some bad blood there or whatever. But so I assisted the practice with that. It was an open closed case. Then there was another office that had OSHA contacted and they were like, what did they say? They said, our family's close with our congressperson. This isn't going to go anywhere. It's like, did I just hear that correctly? Really? Like, rather than address this, you're going to go this roundabout. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me. The elitists at their best. I love it. Yeah. So that was not an ideal fit client. So needless to say, that one didn't last more than a 1-hour consult with that office. Oh, and those are the people I feel super sad about as far as like working with them, the employees. Yeah, like, I feel very sad for the employees that work for people that have that kind of response versus your original, like the one that you just brought up, where it was more like, and the employee was apparently a little bitter when they left, but they were an open office, willing to make changes. It wasn't super egregious, and yeah, and that's the downside. You get all kinds of. You hear all kinds of crazy stories in this field related to safety and infection control. I know we're running out of time, but can I tell you one quick one that just happened? No, yeah. And apparently it's happened to a couple of us. Okay. Literally just happened. So an office calls me up and they said, we've got this patient. They're kind of being combative. They don't want to wear a mask. So we've asked them the screening question. We took the temperature. They don't want to wear a mask. And so we told them, state law requires you to wear a mask. The woman proceeds to whip out a pair of thongs and puts that on over her face and says, yes, okay, I had so many questions, Michelle. I had so many questions. The last question on my mind was whether or not that was acceptable. So I contacted the Department of Health, and they
oh my God, I love
there's
this so
no
much.
specific guidelines for cloth facial cover, no thickness, no nothing. So technically, she had a cloth facial covering. I didn't ask, was it lace? I didn't ask what she was doing with it. I didn't ask if it was
She had
clean. I didn't ask any of that stuff. I had so many questions, but kudos to that practice for the doctor and the front office staff had to come. They were like, we don't want you in this office then. We're going to give you a mask. You can wear this mask. We're going to give you the mask. But if that's how you're going to behave, then I'm not going to risk the safety of my team because you're trying to skirt the law. And apparently this has happened at a couple of different offices. Apparently there's a thong mask thing going on. I don't know, but
oh yes. If you follow on one of my favorite Instagram accounts is Subway Creatures, and it's all the people in the New York subway and all the interesting things that you might see. And it's like thong mask for days. No! And I'm like, well, all right.
What did you say? Subway, what is it?
Subway Creatures.
Subway Creatures. Okay. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to have to open this up to like on my Facebook page and be like, hey, send me your craziest infection control story. Because I know people have them in spades. So
it's really, and you can't get any better than New York. You've seen the giant 5-gallon water bottle on the head, like where they've cut out the bottom and they put the jug on, and then you got the spout at the top so they can breathe. Like that. Those are my favorite, hands down, but there's so many out there. But for that office that might have that combative patient come in there, at the end of the day, can't we be like, this is our office. We are a business, and our business standards say that it needs to be a mask with ear loops or whatever it is. Isn't that your right?
I don't know the legalities of it, but that's what this office did. And I said, kudos to you guys. You said, the CDC recommends source control for all individuals, effective source control. I hate that we have to tell people when you arrive for your appointment, please wear a cloth facial covering that covers your nose and mouth. Clean. We have to tell them clean too, because I've seen some funky looking. Right. So, and so you have to tell them to clean cloth facial covering. And, if they arrive with one that, doesn't meet the bill, then you can always, standard, you can always give them a level 1 or something. But yeah, that is our new normal, right? That's our new normal when it comes to OSHA and infection control. We're going to be faced with stuff like this. I would think that a business should be able to speak, especially if it's, it's not urgent care. Can you postpone? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Come back after
and washing hands. I love the new culture around hand hygiene of like, here's Germex, like before you touch pens, before you like any of that, like what happens here almost stays here in this office before you leave. I'd love for you to like wash your hands or use a hand sanitizer or something. I love that. I'm like, let's just all get right with communicable diseases, infectious diseases, breaking the chain of infection every single chance we get. I'm here for it. And all my friends are like, we've had the flu and we've had this. And I was like, none of that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like none of that was okay. We just needed a major pandemic to move the damn needle. And I'm just here for it and clapping at all the people that have signs and hand sanitizer everywhere. And I'm a little disappointed because I did just leave a place this over the weekend. And I was like, where's your hand sanitizer? And they're like, oh, it's back here. I'm like, we're already getting lax on that now, guys. We're not even out of this pandemic, y'all. Can we hand sanitizer for everybody?
Yes. Even after this pandemic, we should be hand hygiene, left and right, everybody.
Hand hygiene.
Yes.
So true. Well, Karen, I loved chatting with you today. Thank you so much for all your information. As you mentioned earlier, everyone needs to go follow the OSHA Lady, go get those tidbits, go to your website, take some of your courses. I've learned a lot from you. So I'm really super excited that you have all those resources and you came on the podcast with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I can't believe an hour has flown by. It was so much fun.
Always. Always. And I'll be on a nerd high for another 2 hours. This is just how my standard. Every time I have an interview, I'm like, oh, it was so good. And then I'm on this like high for another few hours. And so it's great. It's great. But I really do appreciate your time to come on, your expertise. Thanks for teaching us today. And for everybody, definitely go check out the OSHA Lady. You have Instagram too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Can I follow you on Instagram? I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I see more on Instagram than I do on Facebook. So definitely do that and go to your website. Is it KarenDahl.com, right?
Yes.
DAW?
DAW or the OSHALady.com. Either one will take you there. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for educating and for this opportunity. Really.
Oh, this is awesome. Well, thank you.
Take care.
Well, everyone, be sure to check out her Facebook page or Instagram or go to our website, all of those things. I mean, we definitely need some reminders every now and again. OSHA is super important. And BT Dubs, Andrew, there was somebody in Massachusetts that just got fined, I think on $9,000 and some change because they did not have medical clearance. I'm pretty sure this is what it was. I'm almost positive. Medical clearance for their employees who are wearing N95s. And that's part of OSHA.
Yikes.
Yeah. $9,000, y'all. I mean, if that's a drop in the bucket, great for you. It probably isn't for the most of us, especially after a shutdown where we lost a ton of money in our practices. So,
absolutely.
So that respiratory protection plan is critical if you're having team members using N95s. You also need to be fit test for it. That is not, they waived the renewal, like annual one, but not the initial one. Okay. So y'all know. I would love to play that song, like The More You Know. Doo-doo-doo. I don't know what it is. Yeah. Whatever that was.
From NBC or whatever it was back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely follow Karen. And then you can also follow us at A Tale of Two Hygienists on Facebook and on Instagram. You can head over to our website that has a ton of resources, everyone. Like we have our Science Sundays there. We have our infection control docu-series there. We have, Lacey's writing a blog. We have my articles that I've written before. So there's just tons and tons of content there. Plus you can search any of our CE, like our episodes. So if you want to put in Karen or if you want to put in Stashagomanek, vitamin D, whatever it is, it'll populate all of those things for you. And then the CE for these episodes are always in the show notes. So check those show notes and you can click it and get your CE. Thank you to PDT always for sponsoring the CE portion of this podcast. We are huge fans of them. They're just good people making good instruments and they support it. And they have supported the podcast for a while now, and we appreciate them so much. So go check them out and their instruments and say thank you if you ever do get to meet them in person in 2025. Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, I've eaten my weight in pancakes today, so I'm going to work out now.
Okay. Well, have a good week, everybody.
Bye, y'all.